I didn't even get my door open before Claudia Harper was in my face, clipboard up like a badge, voice sharp as a gavel. "You have 48 hours to comply, Mr. Hayes, or we'll place a lien on your property." I had driven 16 hours to reclaim a 100-year-old farmhouse that my grandfather built, and the first thing the neighborhood served me was a threat dressed in an expensive suit. That moment, standing on my own porch while she told me she could take my house, is the moment this whole thing turned from a restoration project into a war. My name is Logan Hayes. I'm 40. I've been a carpenter since I could hold a chisel, and this place, the pine floors, the wavy glass windows, the barn with my grandfather's name carved in the beams. It's blood. I bought it back 3 weeks earlier. Deed in my name, county permits in my pocket, historical office approval on file. I wanted to sand the floors, mend the porch, plant the garden my grandmother used to tend. I did not want a headache. I did not want a witch hunt. 3 days after I arrived, there was a flyer on the gate, Maplebrook Homeowners Association. All exterior work requires approval. No signature. No legal docket. A slick website, a phone number, and a promise that someone watched this land as if it belonged to them. Then a FedEx packet arrived, heavy cardstock, bold red header. Notice of violation. 7 items: paint color, fence height, commercial vehicle in driveway fines listed $200 per violation per day. $1,400 a day starting immediately. They hadn't even knocked. They'd dropped a bomb and walked away. When their car came around the next afternoon, I recorded the whole thing. The president, Claudia Harper, a man with a clipboard, a woman with a camera. She told me they had authority, that they'd been in jurisdiction since 2019. I asked for proof. She smiled like she owned the scoreboard and said she'd provide necessary documentation. I felt something metallic and cold in my chest. The county record said nothing. The state registry said nothing. There was a website, a mailbox, and a woman who'd decided she could enforce rules that didn't exist. I did what you do when someone tries to take your home. I documented everything. Photographs, scans, timestamps. I called my friend and lawyer Ethan Cole, and he said the words that made the hair on my arms stand up. "This looks like extortion. Record every interaction. Build a paper trail." I started a folder called Harassment Evidence. I put the violation notice in it, and I saved the rest of the week like someone prepping for trial. I put cameras on the porch. I backed up to the cloud. I learned to set my phone to record without looking like I was recording. They escalated. Flyers went up on telephone poles. This property in violation. A smear campaign took off in the local community group, insinuations, anonymous posts. Neighbors who had waved at me the first week now folded their arms and looked away. The pressure was the point: isolate, humiliate, force people to feel alone. It's a classic playbook. Make the cost of staying higher than the cost of leaving. And then I hit the dark spot. There was a night, maybe 3 weeks in, when I sat on my grandfather's porch and wanted to sell. Not because I was tired of the work, because the machine Claudia had started seemed inevitable. The fines were a threat. Even if unenforceable, the neighbors had turned the investigations, took time, and time would run my savings down. I found myself wondering, am I the crazy one? Did I miss something in the deed? Maybe I was naive to think this place could be mine without strings. The thought of walking away felt like betrayal to my grandparents, to the house, but it also felt like escape. I lay in the upstairs room where Grandpa taught me to plane wood, and I almost convinced myself to fold. What pulled me up was 2 things: an old woman down the road, and the moment I realized I knew how to fight the way she fought, Mrs. Blackwood, 74. The only other pre-war house on the lane showed up on my doorstep with a plate of cookies and a look like she'd swallowed the sea. She told me names, dates, patterns. The Lawsons driven out after 6 months of harassment. A young couple who left the state broke and hollow. An elderly widow who sold to avoid trouble and moved into assisted living. These were not accidents. The buys always happened the same way: press finds, fear sale. Harper's companies buy through LLCs, flip the property a year later for hundreds of thousands in profit. That pattern lit up in my head like a flare. I stopped asking if I was wrong and started asking who benefits. When money lines your guesses, you start to see motive. I dug. Public records showed Harper Holdings LLC repeated purchases. Profit margins stacked neatly like cordwood. My hands didn't shake when I picked up the phone to call the Lawsons. They answered with hollow voices. Everett said, "We tried to fight. It destroyed us." Winifred Moss, the widow, said, "I'm 75. I was scared in my own house. They wanted Claudia stopped. They wanted their names back. They were willing to speak. Ethan and I built a plan. Record every interaction, gather witness statements. Map every transaction, install cameras, and this one was crucial. Get her to say on the record what she'd hinted at off mic, that the fines and liens were a tool to make people sell and that she had buyers waiting. You can call that entrapment sting or strategy. I call it strategy when the other side is committing a crime. So I called the number on the flyer and kept it neutral. I let her do the work of revealing motive. What would it take to resolve the violations, I asked. Her voice shifted smooth as olive oil. There's another option. We have investment partners. We could buy your property fast cash, no realtor fees. It's an easy exit. She named a number under market value. The offer expires when we file the lien, she added almost conversationally. The phone on my lap recorded it all. She hung up polite. I did not. I sent that file to Ethan. When I sent it to Delaney Harper, a local investigative reporter who chases consumer fraud for a living, she replied in 2 hours, and she sounded like she'd already seen the truth. We met. We pushed the timeline together. If the evidence was real, if I had what I thought I had, the public needed to see it. The ambush was terrifying. We went to her listed mailbox, a UPS storefront, and then to her neighborhood and filmed a knock on a heavy door. You could see the panic flicker across her face when the camera asked about the LLCs, about purchase patterns, about the call recorded on my phone. The segment aired on a Thursday at 6. 8 minutes that felt like a gavel. They showed my farmhouse in golden hour, then Everett and Winifred and the young couple telling how their lives had been upended. They played the call, Claudia's voice offering to buy me out and warning that the offer would disappear with a lien. They walked through the records, the flips, the profit. They couldn't find a Maplebrook HOA registration with the state. The mailbox was a UPS box. The supposed association's board had no filings. The story landed like a sledge. Then the phone calls started. Neighbors I'd never met apologized. People in the community group changed their tone. The DA called Ethan's office and asked for our files. Delaney's producer told me they'd passed everything to the district attorney. Claudia's car sat at the end of my driveway on the day the local DA's office sent someone to ask questions. She watched from inside lips a tight line. Her reach had been long, but exposure shortens it. She tried to get ahead by suing me for defamation, classic preemptive strike, but we countersued with fraud extortion, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and the pattern put together by the forensic accountant. In court, it felt like the house of cards being knocked down. I walked the judge through the flyer on my gate, the FedEx notice, the drive-bys, the phone call, the flip records, the victims. Everett testified, his voice catching when he described nights they couldn't sleep. Winifred's daughter read bank statements and sale records. The forensic accountant laid it out. Harper's companies bought below market after harassment flipped for huge profits. Then Ethan played this call in the courtroom. Her voice calm and almost kind, detailing a solution that was a squeeze. Silence in the room was like a physical thing. When the jury came back, they didn't just dismiss Claudia's defamation claim, they ruled for us on the countersuit. Fraud, extortion, damages to victims, and barring her from HOA activities. The judge ordered significant restitution and referred the case for criminal charges. I don't describe the sentencing or the tabloid aftermath. The story ends, for the purpose of this recording, when her scheme was stripped bare and the courtroom read the verdict. That was the moment the power she'd prided herself on evaporated. She didn't get a mob scene, she didn't get a dramatic confession in the hallway. She got what the law gives accountability. The day the verdict was read, I sat on the courthouse steps, hands stained with sawdust from the night before, and felt tired in a way that was no longer defeat. I could have walked away when I sat on that floorboard and wished to sell, but I didn't. I used what I had: records, friends, a stubborn work ethic, neighbors with courage, and I turned fear into a case. The farmhouse still needs work. I'm still sanding and scraping and calling suppliers. The victory didn't fix every bruise the scheme left on folks' lives, but it exposed the mechanism and it stopped that particular machine from running in our neighborhood. Document everything. Don't let isolation be the tool that defeats you. If someone's trying to take what you love with paperwork and pressure, make paper fight, paper record, timestamp, witness, publish when you must. Justice isn't always loud, but it's very precise. Build the proof and let it speak.